This is AM Agenda.
Good morning and welcome to the program. Will they or won't they? The big four banks are yet to say if they'll pass through all, part or any of the cut in the official cash rate by the Reserve Bank. The Treasurer says there's no reason for the banks not to. The banks have been warning for months that their borrowing costs have been impacted by the European debt crisis. With me on the program to discuss this and all the other matters of the day, Labor MP Ed Husic and in Melbourne, Liberal MP Josh Frydenberg. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning. How are you all?
Good morning,
Very
Kieran.
well,
Good morning,
you.
Ed.
Good to see you both. I want to start with the banks. Ed, the four banks have not passed it through. They're not delaying this just for the sake of it. It doesn't look good, does it?
Well, no, it doesn't, and you'd hope that they would. I mean, I think there is as much as anything, they'll make a short-term decision with long-term impacts if they don't pass on the cut. I mean, in the longer term, it would be better for the economy to have the uplift that would come by passing the full amount on. I think the two rate cuts combined would probably, on a $300,000 loan, amount to about a $100 cut. So banks can't, I find it funny that banks actually report on consumer confidence and then don't take any accountability for what impact they have on consumer confidence by the decisions they make, like, for example, not passing on the full cut. It's incumbent on them to do it. It's the right thing for the economy for them to do it. They need to get cracking on and do it.
Josh, I guess you'll agree, but let me put to you, play the devil's advocate or the banks.
I don't agree, Kieran.
Let me play the bank's advocate. I'll get your thoughts. Gail Kelly from Westpac says funding markets have become a lot more difficult. The costs have gone up due to the debt crisis. The ANZ boss, Mike Smith's been saying for months that the European crisis is having an impact.
Look, the point here is that we're told we have the world's greatest treasurer, but 55 times the banks have ignored the pleas of Wayne Swan to pass on interest rate cuts. 55 times. And, you know, we're told that we've got a Popeye as treasurer. We've really got a puppy as treasurer because he has failed to have the gravitas to push the banks to pass on these interest rate cuts. What the Reserve Bank was doing...
But you would call on the banks to follow what the message is from Ed and the Treasurer and others?
No, absolutely they should pass on those rate cuts, absolutely. But the point
so you agree on that front,
Wayne Swan has no credibility. And the fact that the Reserve Bank has reduced interest rates is a cautionary note. What they're saying is that China is slowing, that America and Europe is in a bad state, and that effectively this government continues to spend like there's no tomorrow. We just had the mid-year economic forecast. It revealed that the government's debt has blown out to $136 billion, borrowing $100 million extra every day, and their interest bill alone, Kieran, is going to be $20 million a day. That's enough to build 5 teaching hospitals in Australia every year just on the interest bill. So this government is continuing to spend.
Let's go to Ed and ask you about for your response to that. The Treasurer, according to Josh, doesn't have the clout to rein the banks in.
Well, I mean, obviously you're going to say that and ignore the fact that they had interest rate rises. They had interest rate rises numerous times, particularly in the last term of their government, and also banks are basically playing into the political shenanigans of the opposition in terms of if they want to ensure that they don't pass on the cut. That's what we've got here. The banks have to pass this cut on. There is an important economic imperative for them to do it. It is to ensure that confidence strengthens in the economy. It's certainly what a number of us on the government side have been calling for, and I've been in the Parliament calling for this cut because it does have an important beneficial flow-on impact for the economy. So they can either sit on their hands and earn the condemnation of the broader community, or they can get on with the job of passing this interest rate cut through, seeing a much more buoyant economy, which coincidentally will also be beneficial for banks as well.
Josh, do the banks have some defence in pointing to Europe to say, look, our costs have been impacted by the events, the ongoing instability there?
No, I mean, this is not an issue of the banks having good reason not to pass it on. They must pass on these interest rate cuts. But the point is that the Treasurer has been ignored 55 times. And this is a very weak Treasurer. And the fact is that the Australian economy is going to slow as a result of what's happening in China, what's happening in Europe, and what's happening in the US. But we do not have responsible fiscal economic management from this government. They continue to spend rather than to save. They continue to introduce new taxes, a carbon tax and a mining tax, which we've seen graphically will affect jobs. That is not the way to conduct yourself in a difficult international climate. Let's not forget that this government was bequeathed an impressive economic legacy from the Howard Costello government. They had no government debt when they came to power in 2007. There had been 2 million new jobs. Unemployment and inflation was the lowest in 30 years. And what do we have now? $136 billion of debt.
Okay.
So, Kieran, this is bad economic management.
No, I'm not letting him get away with that. Look, you guys keep banking on the fact, you guys keep banking on the history and don't. You know, the Australian
that's
people...
Our record.
That's our record. Absolutely, and that's exactly what I'm going to, your record. Because during the greatest financial crisis that affected the world in 75 years, your answer was not to act. Not to act as strongly, not to act as quickly. Your leader, Tony Abbott, who missed the votes on this, your leader who said we shouldn't, in 2009, public record said we shouldn't spend as much. We have an economy that is the envy of most advanced economies when the IMF is saying, or the OECD is saying that, you know, growth will probably be about 1.4% in the world, and we've got, you know, between 3.5 to 4, depending on what year you take. Huge. Right. So we've made it because of the decisions we've taken.
We have had this debate before, and I want to move on because I know exactly, and our viewers know exactly what both sides are going to say on that front. Let's talk about Chris Riley, Youth Off the Streets. He is a respected youth worker from Western Sydney. You would know him, Ed Husic, from your region. He says that the pre-commitment technology, the mandatory pre-commitment on pokies won't work. His comments are going to be used on flyers by Clubs Australia and 46 electorates today, I guess in yours as well. This is a powerful intervention in this debate, isn't it?
Well, I mean, yeah, look, Father Chris has a lot of background in terms of providing help with young people in terms of trying to get their lives back on track. I don't know what his background is in terms of being able to provide advice on problem gambling, but we have had people say to us in the field that we do need to act on it. I mean, I wish the clubs would spend more time trying to work with us in finding a solution to deal with this issue of problem gambling. That's an issue in my neck of the woods. It's an issue in a lot of people's areas, and try and find solutions to this. Instead, the clubs are spending more money on pamphlets than they are trying to actually get a solution to something that the community recognises is an issue and that we need to tackle. The other thing is too, we can't, you know, we're here because the same old doesn't work. That is, that, you know, problem gambling has been there in our community, causing a issue for families, and the solutions haven't worked. So we've got to find something different to make it work, and you know, that's where we've got to get to.
Well, let's get Josh's thoughts on that. I know, Josh, you're part of the Coalition Task Force on this issue, looking into the Coalition's response. What's your main gripe or problem with, say, for example, having a trial of mandatory pre-commitment? Why not trial it, see if it does work? Because as Josh says, there are some endemic problems out there.
Well, Kieran, I've sat in on a series of hearings where we've heard expert testimony on the issue of mandatory pre-commitment. And what we've heard is that it will not affect the psychology of the gambler. If somebody has a gambling problem and they're forced to set their own pre-commitment limit, of course they're going to set an unrealistic limit. That's the crux of the issue. What we didn't hear from Ed just then was that he supports mandatory pre-commitment because some of his colleagues do not. This is a toxic issue for Labor in New South Wales and Ed's own state, and that's behind this deal with Peter Slipper in some respects. So I think, you know, the Prime Minister doesn't have a heart in it. I think this was a political fix from the start in order to get Andrew Wilkie's vote. I do not think it is the issue in terms of the answer to dealing with problem gambling in Australia. And I think, you know, this government, born out of political weakness, did a desperate deal with Andrew Wilkie, and now they're paying the political price.
OK, we've got to move on. I want to talk about asylum seekers. Before we go to the break, I do want to just get your reaction to this. 220 asylum seekers in the last 24 hours, 1,100 over the last 5 weeks. Ed Husic, will the government bring the Malaysia plan the legislation through the lower house for a vote next year?
Well, I hope we would, because I've previously spoken strongly in favour of having offshore processing as a part of our overall response to try and limit people taking or making the decision to make that dangerous trip across the waters to get here. And I think it is important. I think the test now is on the opposition that's been hammered over its constant negativity to try and find a way to work with us to ensure that offshore processing, as I said, forms a part of our overall response, and we can minimise the risk that comes about by taking those trips over the seas. It's up to the opposition now to allow for governments of either persuasion to have the power and the flexibility to have offshore processing as part of that response, and the test is on them now. Will they just be in the same position that they have previously, which is to oppose everything which people are getting tired of, or are they going to be constructive and work with us, and we're prepared to work with them in finding this solution?
Okay, Josh Frydenberg, do you concede that the pressure will increase on the coalition to at least allow the government to try something on this with this surge of boats that we're seeing?
Kieran, this is a problem of the government's own making. If Ed believes in offshore processing, then he should bring the legislation into the Parliament to send people to Nauru, because that was an effective, proven deterrent. When John Howard left office in 2007, there were only 4 unauthorised arrivals in detention. Since 2007, the government has watered down our laws. We've had over 13,000 unauthorised arrivals. We had the so-called East Timor solution, which never occurred. We've tried Manus Island. It's never been successful. They've now tried the Malaysian solution, which is not a non-signatory to the UN Convention.
So
they've gone from bad to worse. No, you've gone from bad. This is your problem. This is your problem.
No answers, just no answers.
I tell you,
just no.
Nauru's the answer,
No,
and
it's
not onshore processing. Nauru is the answer. No, Nauru is the answer. Nauru is the answer.
Time for a break. We'll be right back.